Right. Okay. We're just rolling right into it. No countdown. We got a power packed evening. Lots going on. This wonderful. It feels like the beginning, but it is the closure. Every end is a beginning. Believing in rebirth. I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited about tonight. We are going to be joined shortly with Dr. Joy James. And but prior to that, just want to get into some thoughts about what this series is all about, what our intentions are here, and where we are going with it. This webinar series is hosted by the DC Child Justice Coalition. We formed this coalition in 2021, at the end of 2021, and we're a network of family-centered, community-based organizations committed to the principles of cooperation and mutual aid. We promote political education, but not as a static activity that is colonial and doesn't only fits in a certain framework of teaching and learning. We are of the pedagogy of the oppressed school of thought here, and we believe thoughts belong to the people. So I also disclaimer, like I did the last time, my little humans are here. They got noise in the background with their devices, which hopefully are distracting enough, but they're also present. So please endure with me on this end as they are letting their presence be known in many different ways. So throughout this series, we have unpacked some important ideas that we hope to really make concrete in our next cycle of thought and political education live streams in the start of the new year. So we're going to take a bit of a break, and we featured these catalog of ideas: abolitionism, captive maternal, disability justice, family policing, reproductive justice. These ideas deserve space and room and understanding and dialogue, and we hope to take it one step further tonight with Dr. James. But in the spirit of where we are, we're not joined with Fari again tonight. Fari is in the community with her lovely grandchildren and family. So we just gonna talk out. I can't do it justice. I wish I had the skill set to take us through a wellness moment with meditation and being present. So we're just gonna do it my style. My style is in sharing ideas and thoughts. So I just want to be reflective that in this whole series, we hope and intend that everybody that participates, that either the things we have said, particularly in session one, where there was a lot of vulnerable sharing of people's lived experiences navigating through family policing systems, that we take care of ourselves. But we don't look at self-care as just this narrow lens. I know the concept of self-care was introduced and promoted within the School of Social Work. So it comes with some of the same carceral logic that follows, and we hope to be disruptive of that as well. We're more of the Audre Lorde school of thought about self-care, right? Like it is a revolutionary act. And it's from self to community. We believe that taking care of ourselves is essential, and whatever that means for you. Self-care doesn't always have to feel good. It just has to be right. It just has to do right and be self-loving and community affirming. So we know that our deepest fear, I love this quote, is not that we're inadequate, and it's truly not. Our deepest fear is just the depth of our power. And we are powerful. And that's why we, as a people, we as Black women, we as brown women, we as crip women, disabled women, we as non-women, we as non-binaries, um, are really the most powerful people on the planet. That's just a fact. And that is why I'd mentioned several times in my tradition, we say Nneka, mother is supreme. And we're going to get into ideas of mothering, of maternal, of matriarchy, and what this all has to do with our key catalog concepts here of reproductive justice, of disability justice, of abolitionism, and of course the family policing systems. So, with this, I want to just kind of recap some defining concepts, defining terms that we have used throughout this process. and adding some imaging, which I didn't do before. I also want to be, I'm very grateful to Antonio and Ryan who are joining us here to provide ASL support. I want to do better. Jedi, turn it down, please. It's too loud. I want to do better at ensuring that, that I even make this even more accessible with visual aids and visual descriptions. So I am a Black woman. I'm really bad at describing myself because it makes me very self-conscious, but I'll do my best to accommodate. I'm a Black woman with nice round cheeks, with long braids and red lipstick in honor of something we're going to get into further when we introduce Dr. James. In this image here, we have Dorothy Roberts. I think it's a younger picture of Dorothy Roberts. There are books behind Dr. Roberts, wearing glasses and a short haircut. And the concept of reproductive justice is, close the door. The concept of reproductive justice is that there was a Black caucus in 1994. This is the first time I heard of reproductive justice. I believe this is the initial articulation of the concept, where it's a framework that includes not only a woman's right to not have a child, but it also is the right to have children and have those children raised with dignity, safety, and in supportive environments. In this image, we have Miriam Kaba, who is also a key theorist in the ideas of abolition, centering first her work on prison abolition, but she was also part of the Upend Conference where I met Joyce McMillan. Should I turn it down, please? It's too loud. With prison abolition, and I'm just going to read this quote verbatim. And the image is Miriam Kaba with an African symbol next to her. I think it is Ikenga. It may be Ikenga. It's a reflective symbol of African fertility and femininity in some form or fashion from some culture, maybe Igbo culture, I'm not sure. Miriam Kaba also has a headscarf on and glasses and a colorful shirt. And in this quote, it says, "My understanding of prison industrial complex, it's that it's a vision of a restructured society where we have everything that we need." So I guess my understanding of ending the prison industrial complex is that it's a vision of restructured society where we have everything that we need to live dignified lives. What this pandemic shows is the limit of personal responsibility and the importance of a systemic response that enables people to take the actions that are needed to have community, safety, and wellness. If the government had acted appropriately by paying people to stay home and by ensuring the folks have everything they need, they would have been through the pandemic a lot quicker. We wouldn't have lost so many people. The pandemic's a window on the need to restructure society and to have a government that responds to people's needs and a politics focused on the sources of people's suffering. The pandemic hasn't changed anything that I've thought. It's reinforced what I think. And what Miriam Kaba thinks is that the system is working perfectly. Part of abolitionist concepts and theory is that the system is working as it is. All the oppression we experience is with intentionality. And so resisting it is to not reform it, is to get rid of it completely. And so I'm very excited about going deeper, particularly on this end of re-envisioning who we are. Jedi, turn it down, please, and keep it down. We're also talking about the family policing system. We use the term family policing. We picked this up from the Upend movement. Upend movement is a movement that speaks to a particular family policing system. But for the purposes of the Child Justice Coalition, we see family policing systems as multiple gateways, child welfare being the most egregious. So the term family policing system refers to what is more commonly known as the child welfare system. But again, as I mentioned, we see it as its connection to the education system, its connection to the healthcare system, its connection to the mental health system, juvenile justice, human services, health, on and on and on. So many systems have carceral logic that are applied and feed into, I guess, the most egregious of them all, which is the child welfare system. And the upend movement believes that this term is more accurately captures the role the systems play in the lives of families, which includes surveillance, regulation, and punishment, all roles associated with policing rather than child welfare. These roles are used to maintain the control of oppression of Black, Native, Latinx families, which also uh, have persistent within it the practice of policing. So, to this, I'm going to pull up Dr. James, and then I'm going to stop sharing this screen first, but I do want to introduce her with us. I adore Dr. James, even though this is the first time we have met. Dr. James is the Ebenezer Fitch Professor of Humanities at Williams College, where she teaches political science and American studies, Africana studies, women and gender studies, and American studies. She's the author of Shadow Boxing, Representations of Black Feminist Politics, Resisting State Violence, Radicalism, Gender, Race in the U.S. Her edited books include The New Abolitionists. So here's, I can't wait to get into your thoughts on abolitionism and where it's going and where we're going with it. Neo-slave narratives and contemporary prison writings and prison intellectuals, state confinement, the Black feminist reader, and the Angela White Davis reader. For the family caregivers that are participating in this series today and previously, we'll be getting half of the cohort will be getting copies of Dr. James's new book, which is In Pursuit of Revolutionary Love. We were only able to order 5 books, but I also just saw it pop up on Barnes & Noble and Amazon, so we'll be ordering more copies to distribute in more spaces. But for the people that have been in the stream, some of them will be getting copies of this book. And in this book, this is a blurb about the In Pursuit of Revolutionary Love. It comprises recent writings of the U.S. American political theorists and visionary Dr. James, focusing on her writings on community and abolition. James carves a path through the love and grief that is the motor for Black liberation. She uses her experiences working with political prisoners to bring forth the traces of this love that makes freedom possible. Dr. James' work is not available outside of academic context. Is that true? I just found this on Amazon. So you please amend and correct as needed. So we're gonna stop there, and I'm going to boot myself off and give you the floor. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. James. Look forward to getting into dialogue a little later on, and cannot wait to hear you unpack.
Okay, I'm not sure. So do I go next?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't clear.
Okay,
Yes,
sorry.
the floor is yours. The
There's
floor
a
is
lot.
yours for as long as you want, as long as you need. So when you unpack, after you finish unpacking your ideas, we'll invite a panel of people to join in dialogue with you on some other ideas that we're going to integrate with yours.
Okay, so since this is organic and we have the beautiful music of your children playing happily in the background, did we also want to add the names of the people on the panel at this moment or repeat them?
Yes, people will be coming. Right now we only have in the back studio. Well, so we have our ASL interpreters, Antonio and Ryan, and they'll be with us the entire time. We have Ayami Hatanaka. Apologies if I did not say that correctly. And we'll be joined by others that, based on availability and accessibility, will join us, and we'll introduce them as they come. And it may be a rotating door tonight, but we'll have a lot to talk about for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for the very kind and loving introduction. I mean, it's wonderful. There's so much that you said. It's incredibly generative, and I won't be able to touch on all the points, but then I don't have to because this is a collective gathering. But there's so much about the individual self-care, right? As you've mentioned, that is connected to our families and our communities. And I always appreciate as an academic, which can be a very I mean, it's a at least on the level that I'm operating, it covers my bills. I get a lot of me time, which is alone time. But it's not exactly a zone of emotional intelligence. And I strongly believe that our politics only go forward if we actually can be practitioners of not only ethics, but a high level of emotional intelligence that meets our needs as individuals in terms of self care. But as you so beautifully stated, that our self care, you know, doesn't have the full depth of its meaning unless it's also connected to community. And family can be many different things, right? Family can be the biological family, the personal family. I put a note in the chat. There's a new journal called Parapraxis, and their first issue that just came out this week is called The Problem of the Family. And yes, there are problems with the family as concept, how we practice love and betrayal within family, right? But a piece that I wrote, Maternal Incoherence, right, is an expression of me grappling with the family, not just as an individual or personal phenomenon, right, but also as an expression of our political will or agape. So what I'm gesturing to in my very open, like you said, I could just go, off grid and talk instead of read. I'm trying to see how the self care can be balanced with the communal care, how we don't work ourselves to exhaustion, which we often do, not just as mothers or parents or reproductive people, right, who care not just for what emerges in our own personal family, but we care for the reproduction of community as a stable, healthy site. But in these endeavors, I think the balancing act is incredibly difficult. And it's not made so just because we don't care about ourselves individually. It's just that we have so little time, right? Independent of putting out fires that we don't start. So the state itself, when I think about it, the democracy itself, right, has always been a hostile environment for us as people of African descent and also for indigenous people and other people as well, poor people, people who immigrate without status or wealth, right? But in this zone of democracy, we stabilize, and this is how I start to think about the captive maternal. We stabilize all structures because we care, but maybe all structures should not be saved or salvaged. So I want to back up a bit with the captive maternal and talk about the historical, because there are different ways in which our ancestors, particularly Black women, haunt me. They also talk to me, I'll be honest about it. I hear voices. So we think often about Black heroic men or the Black men who sacrificed their lives for us, 20th century, right? Malcolm X in 65, before that, Medgar Evers in 63, Martin Luther King in 68, Amilcar Cabral in 73, Chris Hani in 1991. There are all these deaths and losses, not just to the personal family, but the political family that seeks freedom. And then increasingly, we understand and recognize the role of the women, right? Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, for this article in Parapraxis. There's this beautiful photo of Miss Hamer, like sitting on the porch in a chair, right? And gesturing and pointing, but she's teaching. But when I think of these names, from Miss Hamer to Malcolm to Martin Luther King, I think of the betrayals of the democracy and what it means to stabilize a family in a zone of betrayal. I also think historically, right, as a political theorist. And another person who I don't exactly see as my ancestor, but I keep thinking of her and how she managed the betrayals of, quote, family. This would be Sally Hemings, right? And I've said on different platforms that our democracy is a Trojan horse, and we have to raise children and take care of elders as we become older and more frail within a zone of constant betrayal. So Back to Sally Hemings, 14-year-old, the half sister of Martha Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's late wife, because her father was an enslaver and a rapist, right? So Sally Hemings is brought to France to look after people who are actually her nieces, right? And Thomas Jefferson decides that he will engage in capture. Back to the structure of democracy as a zone of betrayal. Every child that Sally Hemings has by Thomas Jefferson, every child that is born and taken care of so that they survive enslavement on that plantation and throughout the South, every child becomes part of the 3/5 clause mechanics or machinations. That means in 1800, Thomas Jefferson, as an enslaver, plantation owner, rapist, he can defeat John Adams, who may not necessarily be a friend, a beloved friend of people of African descent, but he is anti enslaving. So he is an abolitionist. Jefferson can defeat Adams because of the 3/5 clause, because that shapes the Electoral College. Just as going forward, and you don't have to make a direct comparison with the historical figures, but Donald Trump will defeat Hillary Clinton in 2016 because he wins the Electoral College, even though she earns millions more votes than he does. So the 3/5 clause, where Southern plantation owners disproportionately become presidents and shape the history of the United States as a democracy. The 13th Amendment, which says if you've been duly convicted of a crime, involuntary servitude or slavery is still a legal option in the United States. And remember, the 13th Amendment was supposed to be the emancipatory amendment, like, oh, you're free, but not really, Trojan horse time, right? So we're swept up into a carceral network after slavery with the convict prison lease system, where Black people die at a faster rate than we did in slavery because we were worked to death. Because now we're owned not by personal, quote, owners or so-called masters, mistresses who want to maintain their investment. We're owned by the state, right? This mass arrest to have you work on roads, to have you pick cotton, to have you build industries around forestry and so on and so forth, to rebuild the South and also enrich Northern corporations that are investing in the South. 3/5 clause Electoral College is betrayal, Trojan horse. 13th Amendment is betrayal, Trojan horse, right? 14th Amendment, where personhood was supposed to be granted to the emancipated Black communities. But by 2010, the Supreme Court, in its Citizens United decision, has so whittled down our rights, right, that now largely white corporations, fairly wealthy billionaire cachet types, that they have political personhood and so can shape presidential elections with unlimited funding into reactionary candidates. So this is where we raise our kids, in this zone. This is where we self-care, in this zone of democracy, Trojan horse, not just episodic, not just occasionally, but as a stabilized future of the democracy itself. And this is why I think, whether or not you want to call yourself a captive maternal or not, I do. This is why I think, and I agree with, the eloquence that opened this gathering, and I'm about to close in my part. I agree that how we care is fundamental to life itself in this democracy, not just because our generative powers are constantly stolen and repurposed against us to stabilize an order that enslaved us, engaged in mass rape against us, took our children from us to sell them centuries plus ago, and now continues to take our children to put them in markets of transferal in which the state becomes parens patriae or in locos parentis in place of the parent, or where they can be adopted. And are we the only ones who persevere under these conditions? No. I would say we also need to look at and also have alliances with indigenous nations in the United States who are facing the Supreme Court decision on the Indian Child Welfare Act about whether or not their children can be taken from them. And I want to close. I mean, if you want to read the article, it's in the link. It's in Parapraxis again. It has a very useful and very productive interview with Dorothy Roberts. I want to close by asking a question. How do we want to love, not just as providers of care, but how do we want to love and abandon that suggests that rebellion against predatory structures is inherent to our love? And we already know the mothers who do this. We know Joyce McMillan, we know Samira Rice, we know the people who technically may not be mothers, Amanda Wallace, who's struggling in Georgia against the predatory foster care social worker system. We know Dawn Wooden, who risked everything to become a whistleblower against the womb collectors, these forms of violence where women are given hysterectomies. And it's not just the women from ICE. I mean, remember that Sophia Bukhari, former member of the Black Panther Party, member of the Republic of New Africa, when she was incarcerated for 8 years, they forced a hysterectomy on her. And they tried to force an abortion on Asada Shakur. And fortunately, Asada was able to give birth to her daughter. So, this abandonment of love that I'm gesturing to, I cannot define. I can only say that I've seen it in so many people, and not just in biological mothers or trans mothers. I've seen it in fathers. I've seen it in children who raise their younger siblings because their parents are forced to be absent through incarceration, or their parents choose to be political activists because their child was slain by police forces in the US, in Colombia, in Brazil. And so this love, I'll abide by it. But I would love to learn more, not to keep doing love over and over, but why not? How we build a fortress with it, how we use it as strategy, and how we engage in the same love that we give our children, that we want to also have time to give ourselves, how we give that to a political community in which we can imagine and become the architects and the strategies for dismantling all Trojan horses that seek to trot on our freedoms and the freedoms of our family and life itself. You're on mute, or can I not hear you?
Oh,
Or
yes. That's I do that frequently. I forget to unmute myself. I was writing what you were saying, and just as you know, how do we use our love as a fortress, a strategy? How do we give that political community, dismantling all Trojan horses? It's a big question, and I want to bring up some other people here to join us in dialogue about it. I have some thoughts, love to get into it, but let's mute those who are with us. There may be some others that are going to be rotating. Is the text? Um, Fari, I'm gonna mute you, Fari, or to mute yourself till you're ready to speak. Or do you? I'm gonna actually unmute you, Fari, so you can go first and self-introduce, and then we're gonna go to Ayami. And I hope I said that your last name correctly, Hatanaka. And so, Fari, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Jambo Bwana, everyone. I'm Farid Gamina Tumpe. I'm a native Washingtonian. I'm a multi generational caregiver of um, neurodivergent children and toddlers. I'm also part of the Acoma Project, and I'm so sorry I was not able to catch the beginning. But what I did here was so powerful and so eye opening. The Trojan horse theory, something I had am being introduced to this evening. So definitely happy to learn more, and thank you all for having me.
I know that Fari's on the road to Jersey. So Fari, thank you for that. If you do come back on, um, definitely want you to share your thoughts. So, oh, there you are. Are you back? Okay. Fari, we're going to come back to you when you can. Please unmute. Okay. Ayami?
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here unexpectedly. My name is Ayami Hatanaka. She, her, hers. I'm a light skinned East Asian woman. I have long, dark, straight hair. I'm wearing like a plaid top. I currently work as the executive assistant and chief of staff at JMAC for Families, which is run by Joyce McMillan, who I think both Chioma and Professor James has mentioned. I'm also a PhD student in American Studies at NYU. I'm also very proudly a student of Professor James when I was at Williams College, and I'm continuing to learn from her. And then previously, I worked as an advocate at the Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem, where I advocated for and defended parents allegations of abuse and neglect under the family policing system. So, always happy to hear Professor James, and certainly have some thoughts about and questions for her. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And just so you know, this is going to be organic dialogue. So, free flow as we have the time to do so. And Myra, Mama Myra, we're introducing.
Okay, you read my mind. My name is Tomorrow Dobbs. I like to go by Myra. I'm a recent law school graduate. I am very passionate about indigenous principles and this idea of justice. I don't think that we have to stay stagnant or move slowly in the changes that we all need for justice. And whatever institution you want to apply it, whatever society place you want to do this, I just feel like the change needs to come, and I am very active in doing that. I'm in the state of building my holistic health advocacy firm because I want to administrate assistance of getting justice in a 360, right? I don't think it has to be separated in mind, body, and spirit. I think that it's definitely possible to do it in that way. It was already done in ancient civilizations, and we just bringing it back with the face of restorative justice. So that's why I'm here, and I'm here to learn, most importantly, and I'm here to be a student. So.
Thank you so much. And you're also a lawyer, right? I don't know if you introduced that part of you. She's our sharp tool. I always think of, in my mind, I think of the JDs as, sorry to use violent terms. I know that you're not averse to violence. I was also raised by a military man in a military culture. So I tend to use, unfortunately, contradictory analysis here. But, I see the JDs as like a bullet, like straight shoot. And I see the PhD as like swordsman, like we chop, we screw. So we use different tools, hopefully liberatorily for similar ends. For those of us who align with liberation and revolutionary agenda. I do want to maybe start. I want to reintroduce the question that you outlined, Dr. James. So the divisive trinity. I want to talk about this. So the divisive trinity. This is in the womb of Western theory, trauma, time, theft, and the captive maternal. This is where I kind of in literature ground myself with captive maternal, and I have all this new literature. Can't wait to get my copy of the book, In Pursuit of Revolutionary Love, as well. But this, I want us to maybe unpack a little bit this concept of, the divisive trinity, that there's the fully human, right? The incomplete human, the anti-human, and why I think the anti-human being the ungendered slave. I want to talk a little bit more about that. The incomplete human being the free female, free white female, question mark, and the fully human being the free male, free white male, question mark. But I want to say that in my attempts to answer the question. So Dr. James, maybe others may have questions for you, but I'm going to try and answer the question you posed with this divisive trinity in mind, because I think it's foundational, at least in thought here. How do we use our love as a fortress, as strategy? How do we give that a political community, dismantling all Trojan horses? In my mind, the divisive trinity, I feel, at least my interpretation of the whole thing is like, if we are intended to be part of something that is destructive to all of humanity from the lens of white supremacy, right? And that the ungendered slave, I think, is actually, in my mind, when I think about ungenderedness, I think about it in its pre-coloniality, that in the African context, pre-colonial, there's a book, I reference it frequently, Oyewonke Oyewumi. She talks about the invention of women, that the invention of woman is very much compatible with the advent of slavery and colonialism, that it is only in destroying pre-colonial societies in the global South that we see the introduction of gender, period, or gendered politics in the sense, right? So that divisive trinity, I think it starts there, that we are organically ungendered and the slave is ungendered, because not as a destructive thing, but as actually our organic state. And when I think about how do we use love as a fortress within the context that we exist, as this, we are mutable in form as Indigenous people. That is a power and a strength. I love that you also locate people like George Jackson in as a captive maternal, that it truly is an ungendered adventure, and that if we approach it in the spirit of which our ancestors understood it, we activate love also as an ungendered, not necessarily sexualized process, and sexualized even from the production phase, right? That we produce those that we love, we produce more than those that we love, we produce love itself. Love is a production in my mind. But I don't want to get too far out. Hopefully, I want to hear from others what you guys think, and any questions for Dr. James specifically. But anyone want to also venture in answering that? And I do want to hear Dr. James' thought on some of that too. But I'm gonna let everybody, let the spirit move you in speech.
I have a question for Dr. James. And this is Fari again. And my daughter, who is almost 30, has schizophrenia, and I am raising her 3 children that are also neurodivergent. Something that I have discovered within our system of care, our alleged system of care, is that the term trauma informed care is being used a lot within our mental health system. And the disparities that I find between boys and girls um, is very disheartening. My daughter and my granddaughter don't receive the level of care, or trauma focused care, as opposed to trauma informed care. That trauma informed word is kind of like a blanketed umbrella that they're using to supposedly focus on the trauma within care treatment plans. But the marginalization for girls within the system of care is something that I have not been able to penetrate or even effectively advocate for them for. Like my grandson is receiving all the services that he needs. Now, these two children in particular that I'm referring to have the exact same diagnoses, and my granddaughter is not receiving half of the services that she deserves. Can you kind of give me some kind of advice or um, a way to platform my advocacy in this regard?
Can you tell me again where are you located? Is it Washington, D.C. or?
Yes, yes.
Right,
I work with Chioma in Washington, D.C.
right. Yeah, I mean, well, first, I mean, you don't need to me to tell you this, but your capacity to love and be steady. And I grew up in the military, so I'll just say soldier in a loving way. I mean, you know, you're keeping life and love, you're keeping life here through love. And I don't know all the details, but having been in somewhat similar situations, I have an idea of just the exhaustion, but how much you just will yourself to be there. I agree. I mean, it's the gender is a artificial layer, right? That is used to segregate and also to determine the distribution of care. Of course, race is central. I mean, if your kids are black or your grandkids are black, or you take in, other people's kids, and they're black, and you're not a white power couple, right? That's doing some kind of charity like rescue mission that like triggers the sympathetic nerve of these bureaucracies. It's always an uphill struggle. I i know New York better, but I can do some research or speak with people about what possibilities there are, and maybe also Ayame, your organization JMAC might have some information as well. Part of it, I think, I hate to go there, straight from the top, but I'm just doing strategies, and there's never enough money. It's actually to litigate. It's either to publicize the discrepancies and the mistreatment. I agree that these terms they create are become catch-all terms, and it just becomes like you check the box. Well, we gave you some services under this, it's not even a diagnosis under this descriptor, even though you gave medical diagnoses. For me, some of the time it was organizing with other, and it always would be with other Black mothers. Some of the time it was finding money to try to hire private attorneys to get protections for kids, right? Other times it was finding the nonprofits, like in New York City, there's Advocates for Children. So there must be a similar organization in Washington, D.C. And because they're like a watchdog, they're not always friends of parents, but they're technically their job is to make sure that the parents' voice and concerns are heard. And that you kind of need an advocate, because especially if you're a Black parent, a Black female parent, I mean, people hear sounds, but they're not always listening to you, or even trusting you as a source of information that could help the child. So I would look for the equivalent of Advocates for Children, or even, one of these attorney or legal advocate groups. I know there's attorney here on this call who might have some ideas. ProPublica issued a report this week which talked about how Black children, in this case, a bit of a reverse from what you're describing in your family, but how Black boys disproportionately are given the designation of ED, which is emotionally disturbed. And now they're changing it to emotional disability to have, quote, less stigma. But most of our kids, or the kids that I've seen and worked with, have multiple diagnoses. So it doesn't just stop with being on the spectrum or BP or bipolar. I mean, it's just and things can change as they grow older. So since we all pay taxes, I would go to these advocacy groups that benefit from our tax dollars or nonprofits, and create and distribute a list, and also find which individuals working there which would be the most receptive. I also think if you need to do a GoFundMe page for a private attorney, because people, nobody likes to be sued. It is their priority. I don't think, my experience is not the well-being of the kids, it's to avoid a lawsuit. So if there's a way to bring legal in as soldier, academics in as swords, right? You, whatever artillery you want to use, bullet, no bullet, whatever it is. And I'll stop. It's, for me, my understanding, it's a war. It was always a war. I mean, because the state bureaucracies have been conditioned under centuries to not provide what our families need. So they're not going to stop anytime soon unless we can counter them with, I've got this advocate from this public sector, I've got an attorney. And also, I've been a beast of a parent. I will just dog you, and I'll call you like 20 times. Doesn't mean I have the time to do it. Um, but those are just some of the ideas that come to mind. But I really believe, however we struggle in our individual personal families, we need a greater movement that understands this is also part of the carceral network. As a gender, the girls get less, women get less, trans or kids are not even understood most of the time. And if you're Black child, they just assume that pain doesn't really mean all that to you and your family the way a wealthy white family would feel pain.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And it just also connects that you are also parenting a neurodivergent child. I would love to hear that story as much as you feel comfortable sharing. I identify as neurodivergent myself. I'm curious to know how you identify. I know Fari also IDs as neurodivergent. And just want to lift up. So in DC, we have Advocates for Justice and Education, which is our Parent Training Information Center. Shout out to AJE. We are in community with AJE. We are in relationship with AJE. I consult with AJE often. And, Fari, capacity is always a problem. Advocates for Children in New York, Diane O'Ten, who just retired, really consider her as a mentor of mine. So the world is small. I was like, how do you know that? Because you're in the community. You're in the space. So thank you for lifting up every state for those who may not know, who may be tuning in from other spaces. Myra, if you're looking for places to kind of point your guns at right there, as an emerging legal practitioner, we do need our legal eagles that support families right at the core in navigating systems, looking at these disparities. The parentcenterhub.org is monitored, I think, by Advocates for Children, or SPAN, just the greater network that I think is within that space. And you can find any state in the U.S., it's by federal law that every state, per the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, has what's called a Parent Training Information Center. You can find on parentcenterhub.org your PTI, which is the acronym for the Parent Training Information Centers across the country. So if you are in New York, it's Advocates for Children. If you're in Washington, D.C., it's Advocates for Justice and Education. And there's a different name or partnering organization in every state. Just want to lift that up. Fari, but Fari, does that... Oh, go.
Can I say one more thing too? I mean, I don't know if your grandchildren are on Medicaid, but if they are, they come with a social worker, and that social worker is supposed to be their advocate. Like, if it was really difficult under COVID to find psychiatrists for children or pediatric psychiatrists, right? Because so many people, well, one, the stressors on children just went through the roof. I mean, they're losing grandparents and parents, they're out of school, and so their emotional vulnerability skyrocketed. So if you have some of these agencies, definitely try to prevail. My only caveat is stay as far as you can from anything that looks like a foster care corporation, because I mean that's a zone of capture. And I don't know if you're the only adult in the house, but to be the only adult in the house with fragile minors, um who's your network, like at the church or the mosque or like the bridge club? I don't, it's very easy to be isolated. And then when you're that isolated, it's very you're vulnerable as well to different kind of health issues.
Well, I'm connected to advocates and have some experience advocating myself. Chioma has always been the
We're in
greatest.
community together.
Chioma has always been the greatest source of direction for me, um, making sure that I'm aware of what my grandchildren are entitled to. I was just wondering specifically, was there um, something that would directly speak to the marginalization of girls within our system of care?
Yeah, I think
And
sorry, hon, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, no,
There's
no.
I understand, at least on the spectrum, most of the funds and the attention went to the boys. So it's not the same as the diagnoses you were talking about, but it's similar because they would recognize boys, male youth, right, as being autistic or high functioning spectrum. But then the girls kind of just, no, everything got fuzzy. I mean, that's not even a science, right? If you could like look at boys and make determinations, and then when you get to girls, you can't make determinations. And I would say from some of the cases I know, it's when the girls identified as trans and then presented as boys, they got more attention. Obviously, that's not going to happen across the board or all times, but I mean, I kind of defer to you all because this is your wheelhouse, and I would be really interested in hearing how you make the connectors from state to state to state about the resources and if there actually could be a national or unified, response rather than us being in our individual states or individual cities dealing with the DOE or the Committee on Special Education or something.
Well, you actually gave me everything I needed. My takeaway is to go to war and to be a parent in beast mode. So,
Yeah, and you're not gonna go alone. You're not gonna go alone. You're not gonna walk alone, right? I'm, happy to strategize offline with you. I'm always here. No one's gonna take advantage of our baby girl, that's for sure. And we'll lock arms and bring in recruits as needed.
Asante Sana, thank you.
Thank you. But would love to, other thoughts. Any other thoughts, Myra, Ayami? What do you guys think of everything so far?
Yeah. I know Professor James mentioned JMAC as well. So we might not have as good connections in DC to advocates, but you're always more than welcome to email us. I'll put the link to our website in the chat, and then you can always go to About at the top of the page, and then Contact. That way we can get your email to the right person in our organization. So I can share that information as well. In terms of a very technical piece in advocacy, and I'm sure this is something that everyone in the virtual room that we're in already knows, but something I would always tell other folks who are starting out in advocacy is especially over email, especially with like these folks in like these nonprofit kind of spaces that aren't always friendly. I always recommend, and you have to use this, of course, strategically, but I always recommend ending an email with a question. So just saying like, asking your question, whether that is something like, could you please explain to me, why my son has these services? And then strategically, following up with, well, could you tell me why my daughter has XYZ services? Or even ask them, do you know the services that, my children have? Asking questions strategically, but always ending the email with a question. I find that people tend to not read the middle of an email, but they'll read the beginning and at the end. And so one, it gets your question across, but it also kind of forces them to actually reply to you. And I find that like if there's not a question in there, they're not going to feel the pressure to actually reply to you. And then just as Professor James was saying, tenaciously following up saying, hi, it's been 3 days since I sent my email. I'm wondering if, I'll just repeat my question below. Why does my son have these services and my daughter doesn't? Or, something like that. That's just very something small and technical, but I find that questions and asking the questions that sometimes other people aren't willing to ask can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think Fari dropped off. She's on the road, but I'm sure she'll be tuning in, and we'll pick it back up on the replay if she's not able to join back, or they're not able to join back.
And if you do have health insurance from your employer, then and you can cover the co-pays. If you can get private, through your employer, right, psychiatrists or psychologists, then you can counter these other medical experts. And sometimes, I don't get how they got the label of experts, but anyway, that I don't have to be snarky. But you could, like, I'll just say, I'll counter you with my psychologist. Like, you throw yours down, I'll throw mine down. And there's something about having to talk to a peer in their profession that makes them less sloppy.
Right. And it's your right. By law, you have a right to disagree with any evaluation. You can ask for independent education evaluation on the school's dime, right? I mean, that's if with caveat, right? And if the school refuses, then they're going to take you to court. If the school agrees, if they don't take you to court, then they have to fund it. It's fund or file. They either have to file or due process. There's so many nuances with it. Fari is very knowledgeable about it. I think I feel like maybe the questioning Fari was putting forward is just the contradiction there, that it's very difficult sometimes for girls to be identified as need of additional support, right? And what informs that need, and then counteractively, there's this hyper engagement of the boys, right? Hyper trying to identify what's wrong with the boys and trying to criminalize the boys, restrain, the very violent engagement with the boys, and this very similarly violent, but in a more passive way, ignoring of the need, the emotional need, and should it require any kind of clinical intervention, it seems to be a much more uphill journey. I've heard that from other caregivers and other moms. She's got an autistic daughter and an autistic son. There seems to be some access for a daughter that she's not able to get for her son. There are real contradictions there, and I think Fari is maybe introducing that. Fari is a real fighter. Like, let's not underscore the kind of warrior caregiver that Fari is.
I don't want to
can I add to that?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm hearing these things, and it's like these are strategies that you can take, but even as someone who has still dealing with severe depression, when dealing with these institutions, all those are yes. But the people that I engage with, they're not tech savvy. They don't know how to articulate it in a way which people will deem to be respectable, right? So they don't know how to code switch. And because they don't know how to code switch, they get met with this stigma that they're being aggressive, that they don't care about their children, that they're not performing or up in a way where people can be susceptible to help them, right? But these institutes are put in place, whether you like a person or not, you're still supposed to help them, right? And I think my job is, or what I'm supposed to bring to the conversation is the attack on the actual policy and norms within these institutions. Because each individual person could write an email, but it's the anti-Blackness, right? It's the sexism tied into it, and trying to detach them. To me, is where we need to have, where people like what I'm doing, should be focusing in on, right? So it shouldn't be a fight. Fari shouldn't have to fight. The red carpet should be laid out for her. But the thing is, she's coming into spaces where people have already been socialized to think a certain way about Black girls. They've already have these ideas. So that's what I think to pinpoint it. What is your education as a representative for the state agency? And having them do real work. What I mean by that, when you're doing your diverting, we're going to put you in a hot spot now. You're not going to say what you want to say. You're prepared, not on what's coming. What we're going to be doing is there's going to be private services, and we're going to put your feet to the fire. Listen, just these detectives doing it for the drug war and things like that. It should be people in the state agency really doing it for real. And it should not be people that's part of the government. These should be private organizations going in, acting as if they're a person who's just trying to get services and see what's really going on. And it should be documented, just like the police officers have body cams. It should be documented now. It's not I wrote a report and this is my interpretation, because we're all human and we all have biases, right? Let the footage show what's really happening. And it's like how about these things to say, oh no, you're doing too much now. You're trying to make social service people seem like they're bad people. I'm not making them seem like bad people. This is real life, day-to-day happening to everyone. People are getting discouraged. Just already. So why can't they be held accountable in that way? It's not policing them, it's holding them accountable. Because if someone is really experiencing this type of thing, that is emotionally and mentally abusive for people who already are dealing with too much stuff, and everybody's not equipped to articulate it in the way that we are. Everybody's not going to sit up there and remember at the beginning of the email and the bottom of the email, this is what you need to do. That's not everybody, and it's not everybody's job. That's why there's certain advocates in place. So yeah, we do the labor, but I'm more attacking the actual institution and their social norms within the institution, and letting them see, not policing them, but letting them see who you are.
Yeah, so I'm of the opinion that education is the messiest playground for these kinds of ideas, because even as I'm hearing you say what you're saying, there's resistance there, right? The bringing in of the private actors, people, the unions will weaponize neoliberalism, never unpack what that means, right? Never really get into the nuances of the layers of that, and we'll use anti-capitalist language for capitalist gain. There's that contradiction, but it is a real thing, right? Like when the state is out of control, yes, we're dealing with the imperialist state, yes, we're dealing with the capitalist state, we're dealing with the white supremacist state, but is the state inherently a bad agent? And should we be feeding into the private marketplace, which is just capitalist traps everywhere in some ways? And I want to use this as an opportunity to get back to theory. Not, it feels weird to get back to theory, but I do want to.
When you say the state, the people. But you know that I don't look at the state and the people as two different entities. We are the state. That's what that boogeyman, the people, the state is out to get us. It's people like me that's sitting in that chair administrating harm.
James.
And they're doing it because those are the social norms.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Myra. So sorry. Did somebody else want to talk? Okay. Yeah. So are we talking about class now? There's no? Okay, because there's a sector of
let's talk about it. Let's talk about class.
Like we got the black judges, teachers, first black woman, NYPD commissioner. Kamala Harris was doing her prosecutor thing, like threatening, I'm betting majority Black families without resources if you don't send your kid to school, and those schools had deficits, right? So it's like, go put your kid in Harvard, make them go someplace that you wouldn't even want to go in, and if you don't, just look, hey, pay this fee instead of buying groceries for your kids, right? So it feels like we're conflicted. So what would I don't believe the state will do anything for us. And as I said before, I grew up in the military. So we were stabilized in terms of resources, but it was a predatory zone. It was like, we're working for empire here. And we kill people. It was literally, that's what the military does, right? But then you have all this pageantry and you like pledge allegiance and you do all this performative stuff. And so how is it not that we haven't been doing performative stuff for the state by pretending it is not inherently harmful, just like US militarism is? Everybody we're talking about is some version of a cop,
That's right.
right?
Right
So,
down to the psychiatrist that's going to do the
oh,
evaluation.
geez. Yeah, and
Yes, and
if
as
you
a
don't show it,
veteran,
go ahead.
but
As,
as a veteran,
go ahead.
but as a veteran, I'm a, but we're a human
So,
being.
Myra,
That's
I
what
got to let you know
separates
that
the
you're
state
breaking up.
from
I
who
think,
we
Myra,
are in the
can I pause
society.
for a
When you walk
second?
in that door, the people who are
Myra,
you-
you're breaking up. You're breaking up. Can you try
yes,
going off camera? Maybe we can hear you better, because
yes,
I'd rather hear you clearly.
okay. What about now?
Yes.
Dang it! Yes. Oh, okay. Oh, so I was in the military. I get what you're saying. I understand. I had to go through the process of decolonizing my mind. I get it. And as I get it and I'm decolonizing my mind, the state is not a boogeyman. The state is us, right? We fuel this machine. At the end of the day, when we're talking about predominantly Black communities, and I've said this before on many of my interactions with Chai and all of her webinars and her series and her engagement with the people that I meet through her, anti-Blackness is a real thing, but it's not something that can't be eradicated once we address it, because we keep sweeping it under the rug. This is why it happens, because we keep acting like it's not what it is. You're right. It's Black judges, it's Black politicians, but those are not superhuman beings. Those are regular human beings. I am a regular human person, and I've been in these spaces. I've been in these positions. I've worked in these government entities. The fact is, we have to challenge the societal norms and the social norms within that office. So yes, the policy might be shaped a certain way, but if you don't have enough courage when you're in that space to call it out, then the cycle continues. We have to call it out. So it might be one person that get the blow, but you felt what I said when I left. So it's going to be a shift. It's going to be a change. I don't leave and think that everything is just going to be the same. You heard me when I said that was anti-Blackness. You heard me when I said that was sexist. You heard me when I said that was colorist. Nobody said before. So now it's in your face. You're going to do something about it because you don't want to see another person like me come. And it just has to be more people like me to go, oh, okay. So they're coming in waves now. It's just not that individual crazy Black woman. No, because what I'm saying is correct. So the state, yes, the state is cool, but the state is not the boogeyman. We are the state. When I step into those social institutions, I'm looking at somebody that looks just like me, that grew up just like me. The process comes in, stop self-hating. It's so when you know there's self-hatred, you acknowledge that.
I think I hear what Dr. The introduction of class is really important, right? Because not all Black people, or particularly the more vulnerable you are in society, the harder it is to articulate as the state, right? Like the state will let you know you're not the state in a minute, right? And will let you know that you are othered in that situation. We talked about Fanon before. I do want to think. I want to take this, and I want these ideas that I want to get down inside, because I think we don't give ideas enough room to breathe. And Dr. James has this amazing theory of captive maternal, and I want us to get there. And I hear Myra in what you're saying. What does it mean to revolutionize? Even in answering that question, how do we activate our love? Yes, maybe if we assume more state control, but not idealistically. And okay,
I'm sorry. Okay, so thank you, Myra. Okay, so this is tough, right? Because I didn't enlist, but I was in ROTC for years, right? So, but I didn't go as far, and I didn't risk as much as you did and other people, right? And I think there's different ways to say thank you for your service. But I also think, and to different people, because I also would say that to political prisoners who rebelled against the state. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yes. I know you're there. I know you're there. Okay, so now we just have to roll out the blueprints and figure out what we're going to do. So it seems to, I want to ask you how you think about Maranaj, and I want to say something quickly, and then, be quiet so I can hear you. When I think of the captive maternal, they're going through stages. The first stage is the conflicted caretaker, right? Or celebratory. The conflict, I got to put my kids in that like school down the street, or Kamala Harris is going to like, send me a bill or put me in jail. Or yay, my kid got into this white prep school and all these little white supremacists, rich kids, right there. And so either way, our kids are placed into harmful environments, and we're just conflicted or celebratory if we think we're climbing the ladder. The next zone or stage would be like the protest movement, right? And we saw that with George Floyd. And the third would be like, we got a movement. And actually, as Daruba says, if BLM had meant Black Liberation Movement instead of Black Lives Matter, we would have had stronger demands, kind of what you put on the table, Myra. It's just, we're just going to call it out. But that's not the way, with all that money, millions of dollars coming in, you buy silence or acquiescence. Then we move on, from the movement, right, to Maranaj. And I'm really interested in what you think about independent liberation schools, independent reading clubs, independent, like we feed our own people, like FTP. It can mean different things, but it also can mean feed the people, right? Which is an organization in Atlanta. But this is the way I see it. That last stage is a war resistor, because we are not supposed to be, exactly what you said, anti-Blackness does not permit Black autonomy to change the world. I started listing people who got assassinated because they loved. They loved. They weren't like doing underground criminal shit. They were just, they love people, and they knew how they were going to go out because they love. And what's the possibility that parts of our essence constantly seep away from us because we love, and the predatory structure doesn't love. It has no emotional intelligence. And so from pledging allegiance to like being loyal, whatever in Texas, whatever I was supposed to be doing there, I want to keep the love, but I don't want to keep the state. And I want to know, and I won't live long enough to see the state go. I just want to like leave some kind of insurance policy for my kids that I did enough so they don't go to prison, get shot up, or like want to take themselves out by suicide because it's just too depressing and scary to be here. So Maranaj, those stages of Maranaj, war resistor, I'm really curious as someone who knows the structure of state violence and state war, or everybody, like how you grapple with that and what's the plan?
How I grapple with it. First, I am very attentive to my emotions. I do not steer away from the emotion of anger anymore, because I was taught that it is it's a crippling emotion, and I empowered myself. It's not crippling. I am angry because, just like you said, the conditions of this society is precisely that. And because I'm angry, I fall deeper in love with myself. Because if you put me on survival mode, now I'm going to really show you what it is. When I think of a state, because I have learned the ins and out of the structure of how the state was created, I understand that we can utilize that to our best ability. I don't think that there has to be a detachment or a confliction between independence and holding the government accountable. So indigenous people of this land who identify as tribes, they have their own governance within this country. Now, it's a subservient to the Constitution, absolutely. But I feel like those tribes who are being recognized, once they are able to strengthen themselves more, that their independence will be stronger. But as far as Black people, we can have the same thing. We can be independent and given what we are rightfully entitled to. But that requires open-mindedness. That requires going into spaces without permission, right? Going outside these boxes of, well, it's this way or this way, and we can't go that direction because I'm the person to go. We can. I see the underlining of how we can use our constitutional rights, how we can use our human rights, and how you can use the Declaration of Human Rights and act in international humanitarian law, because we are captive. Just off your material, we are captive still. So once we recognize that, there's a lot that y'all supposed to be doing. And we have people already in there who know the policy, who are workers, who are employees of the government. But that's going to require them to do the emotional and mental labor of loving themselves. Because I'm just like you, love is powerful. I hate it. Ain't got nothing in comparison to love. So when someone is able to have compassion and empathy, it ain't hard to do. But because we have been captive in this country for so long, it's messed us up psychologically. But when someone has empathy and compassion for that person who they are servicing, that right there is an energy shift. So my strategy for what I'm doing is looking at the law that is in place, the law that was given to us through brutality, and interpreting in a way that's more beneficial for people who look like me. And that does require a detachment from it. I'm all about abolishing the Constitution, because we should have been had a new Constitution. We should have been had a new constitutional convention, because it's not reflective of the population in which it is servicing now. And that's just not for Black people. That's just period in America.
I just want to talk a little bit about the link I shared, which I think is related to the conversation that's being had. And I know sometimes that these articles can be behind a paywall. So if anyone can't access it, I can send you a PDF of it. But something that I think isn't made clear, and that I found disappointing with this article, that I don't think this article made clear, is that essentially there was an outside consultant group, right? This kind of saying, we're going to hold this government agency accountable, just like Myra was saying. ACS, which is the Administration for Children's Services in New York City, which is the family policing arm of New York City, commissioned an outside consultant to help them kind of address racism in ACS. They received the report and essentially they buried it. The way it came out is that an organization called the Bronx Defenders had to submit a FOIL request. So in that report, ACS's own employees, people who are the cops policing families, are saying, this is racist. And I am being forced to police particularly Black and brown families. And so the article, I don't think, is super clear that ACS buried the report. And this is not my thought. I'm just kind of repeating what much smarter people than me have said, which is that I think when you see that there are people who are willing to speak out and put their jobs on the line and say, I'm seeing the way that I am being forced to police Black and brown people, I think that those people are kind of trying at least to express that love and care for people. And at the same time, they're in a system that was designed with anti-Blackness. If you try to push against those systems, it's always, you have to talk to my boss, you have to talk to my boss, you have to talk to my boss, until you get to even the commissioner, the top person of that agency. And so I think to an extent, we have to ask questions about, if we're talking about kind of reforming the inside of the state, if the very foundation and the structure of the state itself is programmed, and you can even see with some of the language I'm using, much smarter people like Professor James have articulated this, but I think there's kind of this question of like, how much can we actually reform that system if the existing structure itself is built upon not, let's take the family policing system, for example, not protecting children, but policing families. The entire purpose of it isn't premised on protecting children. If you look at the data, if you look at what's happening to people, they're just tearing families apart. So it can't possibly be about protecting families. It can't possibly be about protecting children, because this system is harming children more than when they're with their families. Statistics speak for themselves. They're much less likely to graduate high school. Sexual violence, physical violence happens to them more likely in foster care than if they're with their own families. So then we have to begin to ask questions of, well, then why does this system even exist? If when they're confronted with their own racism, they receive the report and they're just going to bury it, then it's not about protecting children. And I think we have to ask, what is this system actually doing? What is its purpose? Why does it exist? What's the foundational structure? What is the architecture here?
so much. I want to hear Dr. James talk. Say, you know, I feel like, and so this is my layup. I'm just gonna, part of my rigidity, part of my neurodiversity is that I have to get through what I tend to get through. So I want to introduce this concept of weapon of theory, right? In this, I feel like maybe we're talking about different things. I think that maybe when I hear Myra say the state, I'm hearing something different than when I hear Dr. James say the state within the context of Mawanaj, within a context of resistance, and within a context of the hegemonic state, the imperial state, versus the socialist state, the people's state. And but what is the reality of where we are? And I just wanted to bring in Cabral here as a train of thought to go down a rabbit hole that I think, in my mind as an African immigrant, the concept of this weapon of theory, I think, is, well, he says tricontinental. So Cabral says that, like, when the African people say in their simple language that no matter how hot the water from the well, it will not cook your rice, right? I mean, hence, let's just take that. I'm not, save the commentary for later. They express with singular simplicity a fundamental principle, not only physics, but also of political science. We know that the development of phenomenon and movement, whatever is external appearance, depends mainly on the internal characteristics. We also know that on the political level, our own reality, however fine and attractive that reality of others may be, can only be transformed by detailed knowledge of it. Emphasis on detailed knowledge of it. By our own effort, by our own sacrifice. Right? And he goes on and talking about where he was when he said this is in 66. Cabral is from Cape Verde and Guinea, I think Bissau jointly. He's coming to Cuba. He's meeting the Panthers. He's meeting people in movement from different parts of Africa, the Caribbean, and the United States. And this is empowering to say what informs our thought. At least that's what I get from it, as you know, just went down the rabbit hole. Are we using the same framework in talking about the state and the power of taking over the state? Dr. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Cabral, his book, the PDF is online. Thank you for putting that up. I mean, brilliant, loving father, partner. I mean, so yeah, he's in Cuba, but he's also in the US. And let me back up. This is be garble, but make a smoothie out of it. I don't care. So there's this moment where Malcolm talks in Ballad or the Bullet, right? When he's wrapping up, and he says there's this conservative white politician who says that the Africans don't care anything about African Americans or the Negroes or Black people in the US. And Malcolm says, I'm on my way there. I'll be there in a couple of weeks and I'll let you know. But then his closer, right? He closes and he says, you know, whether I come back and tell you, it doesn't matter because I'm telling you right now. He said, they love us and we love them. And so I think sometimes our love registers on the level of an abstraction. But I would argue it registers on the level of recognition. And that's what Cabral saw while he's moving around. You see, there are differences about our conditions, right? I mean, people in the US throw away food. That would be like in other countries, like the babies are starving. What do you mean you just threw out half a meal? Like, you know, that's an insanity, right? They poison water, not just the corporations, mostly the corporation, but our carelessness or our adjustment to living in empire makes us sloppy, right? But what Cabral reminds us is that we're connected. This is tricontinental. We're moving on 3 continents here. And we could say, well, that was a historical moment in the 60s and the anti-colonial struggles. But the Panthers, and then there are Panthers who maybe are more reticent or Panther adjacent who are more performative. I don't always know what's going on with the Panthers. But the ones that I read, right? It's a word that we haven't brought to the table. They're revolutionaries. We're actually talking about revolutionary struggle. We can call it war, but an imperial war is different from an anti imperial war. And an imperialist state cannot be rehabilitated. I would say, like, in terms of my family dysfunction, grew up with a military wife, wife of an officer. What did they do with them to make them tolerate the environment? Um, Everybody is on, what was that drug all those women were on in like the 50s, 60s, 70s? What was that drug? Somebody knows that.
Opium?
What is it?
Was it opium?
No, that's way too hard.
Like they have.
Is this what kind of for
No,
what purpose?
doing.
What is it called, Myra?
So it was
Now I
something. Man, it was.
I
It was
think
hard.
I'm too
It was a hard
immigrant.
drug.
What was prescribed
They
by
was
the
on the heavy
army
in the 50s.
physician? Yeah, I mean the way in which people got stuck on oxy, um, it was like if you
Prozac? You talking about Prozac?
no, it wasn't Prozac. I mean, we're not going to spend all night trying to figure out what it is, but it was prescribed because it was a sedative. Like you be railing, like I gotta like figure out if you're coming back from Vietnam or not, or I don't even want to know what you're doing over there, right? It's always a zone of deception that it has a negative impact on family. I mean, the way my father, when I have to go clean out when my father dies, right? And I wrote about this in Warfare in American Homeland, and I'm hoping I'm working in the theory. Um, I'm vacuuming, the rug in his like nice condo, and then I realize I'm so traumatized. I'm vacuuming over bullets, literally. And then I'm like, wait, what did your training tell you? You're supposed to be vacuuming over live ammunition? And then I get on my knees and I'm just picking up the bullets out of the plush, right, carpet. And then I'm collecting some 20 something guns. And then, I mean, I'm going to just be real. Everything's a mess. He dies, he decomposes. I got to like clean up this. This is what we do as CMs, as captive maternals. And basically, he killed himself because we can't tolerate the contradictions. I think we can tolerate them if we entertain the reality of a revolutionary struggle and revolutionary theory. In the absence of that, I think we're playing games with ourselves. And that's how it's not Ritalin. I mean, that's what they give the kids.
Right.
It's not Prozac, but it was something close to it. What is it, Santa? Or whatever it was. You had to drug. Like my mother came up Mississippi sharecropper. My father came up, like I said, playing the clarinet with private lessons and completely dysfunctional, different classes in the same family. Never was going to work. But the one thing they knew was that they were going to try to survive as long as they could until they would stop trying. And I think it is the revolutionary struggles that tell you that you will survive as long as you can until they take you out. Where they take you out like Mumia and put you in prison for decades, or Sundiata Kohli, or Motulu Shakur, or I mean, there's a whole list, Kamal Siddiqui, Leonard Peltier. If this is a war, then we must respond as if it were a war, and we must read the guerrilla intellectuals such as Cabral.
Yeah.
And try to understand a half a century later when they twist the meaning about almost everything and sell it back to us through Wakanda. We have to understand what the costs of freedom are, and that we love so much that we pay the cost every single day. We just have to have the theory and the consciousness to say, oh, this is what we're doing. It's not privatized suffering that you have to drug my mother.
Oof. Good Lord. It's not I mean, shots, too many shots fired, right? Like, I mean, and so I think of the last poets, there's a song that goes, blessed are those who struggle. Oppression is worse than the grave. It's better to die for a noble cause than to live and then die a slave, right? Like that is the, I think that is the epitome of love. That is the epitome of agape. That's the essence of it to me. But I also think is so much there, right? Like we are we are consuming love in a way that makes us feel like we're in resistance. like the Wakanda reference, right? Like, love Chadwick Boseman, disability, may his perfect ancestral soul transition well. But it's just really, it is, we should feel kind of really insulted by the way our love is repackaged for us in a way that I don't think we have. I think totality just as a people, have the tools, like you said, like, our adjustment to empire, living in empire makes us sloppy, and nothing more than when our emotions are constantly being played with what Black power should feel like. No.
Okay, so yes, on the in the masculine principle, yes, but I strategize like a woman. This thing is a spiritual thing too. So it's not just doing guerrilla warfare in a way that historically men have told us that we're supposed to do war. That's why I'm so adamant about independent thought and critical thinking from Black women. Because for too often we've been told that this is not the way it's supposed to go. And now we're getting back into our divine feminine. And I know that's a trendy word, but it's the real deal. Like, it's the real deal. I don't care how much somebody try to commercialize it. We do have the tools. It's in us. When you get into a space of healing, you activate this. I'm a living witness of it. The more you get into this space where you can be soft and stable, and you can be within self, and you can take that journey within self, you determine what's the best. So when Dr. J and I was having an idea about state, that wasn't confliction, that was collaboration. That's her strategy, and that's the perspective that she has to have in order to do what she needs to do, and I have to have my perspective, because it has to be a force together. It's not me go where Dr. J says, listen to what Dr. J says, so when she moves in the way she needs to move, I won't get in her way. That's strategy. So I love to hear this conversation, but I just had to say that part because I think Black women are getting to a point where we are getting healthy enough to stand in our independence. And when we stand heavy in our independence, it's just a trickle effect in our community. Is it a lot of weight to bear? Yes. But as you heal, you understand why. And I don't think it always has to be a bloody battle, kind of like what they showed us with Wakanda. Sometimes it can just be, the battle can be won by social services. The battle can be won because you stop a generational thing that was happening in your family. Your mother and you are repairing your relationship. That's revolutionary to me. Your mother and your father get to live a long life. That's a revolutionary, because you're able to be an adequate caretaker to them. That's revolutionary to me. You get to sit with your children and be in safety. Now y'all not millionaires, but you get to be in moments with them. That's revolutionary to me. I think every point of this is revolutionary.
Thank you, Myra. Okay, my respect. Now, we are on different sides, like we're playing badminton or ping pong or something here, right?
It's a brilliant dialectic, I think.
It's a dialectic thing. Oh, you love theory, honey. It's like, yes, okay, this is a dialectical struggle here. There's a review of the new was women, it's called Comrades, Sisters, something like that, subtitle Women in the Black Panther Party. There's a review in the New York Times, and the title, which threw me off, I didn't have time to read it, but it said the survival programs are what, that equals freedom or revolutionary struggle. And I want to be honest, I was like, because I've also seen the Sada's daughters thing. And let's just say, like, maybe I've gone offshore and met people, right? I think this is what I think is happening. I could be wrong. It's what I think is happening. I think that the theory is being reworked into a care package. And so that what we end up with is equating survival with freedom. That was the title, like the survival programs with freedom. I got braces because my father was an officer, right? That's survival. That's not freedom. I got food because my father was an army. That's survival. It's not freedom. Those are survival and freedom are not synonyms. But I think the trajectory on now is like if you just keep them alive, then that's like that's freedom. That's an achievement. But as we know, we don't want to list all the children the cops shot up and other people shot up who aren't cops, right? We don't want to, remember, even if I say everybody on this platform, but this society doesn't want to remember how many Black children are sex trafficked and nobody can find them. And it's the girls at really high percentage. But also I've heard from Christy House, the boys numbers, and they have less disclosure. They're like 40%. Well, if y'all don't even talk about it and you're hitting 40%. No, this is just like international child pedophile rings, right? And gender is important, but it's not determinative. And survival is important. But that's not we're not going to survive. It'd be nice if we go out old age, whatever, and everybody's at the bed.
At all.
What, hun?
Yes.
Yeah, but
that's going to thrive. That's when it's like revolutionary to me is not just being a body to be used again, right? In the slave mentality, because it's a lot of slave mentality, and it's not just Black people. Mm-hmm. I think Americans have a slave mentality, and they're not even aware of it. So when I say the revolution, yes, my parents survived, but I'm here now. We thriving. What you gonna come, mama, daddy, sister, brother, cousin? But the thing is, I'm not going to me. I'm gonna understand what's going on in society, but you won't take my joy. You won't take my happiness. I won't make this a tragedy, because we so caught. Mm-hmm. I think in this country, because we have all these television programs, we have all this Netflix, we have all this thing. It's like like this trend on social media. I'm in my villain era. That to me, I reject that, because you're trying to make this this human interaction that we haven't. You're trying to control it. Ain't no controlling it. Ain't no controlling it. You do your best, you show up, but you can only work within your side yourself. So that's why that's revolutionary to me. To have, you got to be able to think for yourself. You have to be able to think for yourself. You have to be the person that's the vessel in which you determine what your happiness is. Yes, there's a lot of things going on. Yes.
Let me ask you a question about agape, because that's in Pursuit of Revolutionary Love. It ends with a letter from Peaches, right? Who is like some 19-year-old who's in the Southern California Black Panther chapter when California or Los Angeles decides they're going to create SWAT and test it out on the Panthers. And the Panthers don't do anything. It's like, oh, we're going to create a SWAT. And like, who do we target? We're like, we experiment on Black people from Tuskegee, before Tuskegee, right? This is what we do, right? Because Black life is disposable. One dies, get another. That's a book about the convict prison lease system. So what Peaches does when she's in the jail, she writes a letter to her parents. And she's like, she signs it. She ends, your beloved child, your only child, Peaches, right? She's like, I could have like built a career. I could have stayed in school. I could have done drugs. Parents got money. I could have gone shopping all day, all time. But I have this love for the people. And I don't want you to visit me here because I don't want you to see the conditions under which I'm forced to live. But you need to know how much I love. And I start to think about agape. Love is political will. And that political will is what trips us into revolutionary acts. Because we can't save everybody. There's no way in hell that we save everybody. And this is a predatory state. It kills a lot of people. Kevin Johnson is on death row right now. He's to be executed a week from today. Why? Because he's growing up, his parents are addicted or absent, there's no food, he and his little brother are trying to catch roaches to eat them. He's like obviously going to be neurodiverse, okay? Mom was on something when she gave birth. But then like when he's 19, has a baby when he's 17, babysitting his like little 2-year-old, he asks his 12-year-old brother to do a favor when the police are looking for him. And the brother collapses in the house next door and he can see him from a side house, like from the attic. And the police are just stepping over his body. When the mother shows up, that kind of love, she tries to push through the front door to get to the 12-year-old Bam Bam. Doesn't happen. She tries to climb in the kitchen window. They push her out. And what happens? The 12-year-old has cardiac arrest and he dies. Could somebody have saved him? Nobody knows. But in the 19-year-old mind of Kevin, you killed my 12-year-old I was helping to raise, because the kids are raising kids. We already know that. And so when he's like wandering the streets, just yelling or crying and stuff, he sees the white police officer who is in charge and he shoots him. And instead of reading that as mental health, psychotic breakdown, too much poverty, neglect for kids, you put him in foster care. He was put in foster care. He was brutalized. It's just like, no, it's just another Black person we need to take out of the state of Missouri. Now, for me, I can only handle that level of grief. And I love what you said, Myra. If I love myself to the point that I'm willing, I mean, I don't have all your fire, but I'd say I have like 15%, that I'm willing to say anything to anybody to tell them to back up with the predatory machinery.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I need a collective. And I know, we did
Yes.
something with the Afro Pessimist last Tuesday, and, we have differences, but I remember like we met each other 20 years ago because we were talking about political prisoners at Brown, and we caught hell for bringing them there. And we're always doing rebel stuff. Mamie Till Mobley, open casket funeral for a tortured, mutilated 14-year-old. Nobody does that. That breaks every kind of decorum, and that will put you in a depression for 6 months. People took their kids by that open casket and made them look. That would be child abuse today. We did that because this is how we survive. We do stuff people can't even imagine we would do to change the world. And for me, that is agape. That the political will, the way we love, the highest level, the theologians say, and you don't have to believe them, but there's like family love, your partner love, self-love. The highest love is a love you don't even want to give, but you force yourself out of will, and that is agape.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so I want to go a little further down the rabbit hole. Lots been said right now, and I think that the part that I want to maybe unpack, yes, agape is agape gendered? Is there or is it energetic polarization here in terms of, is there a masculinization of agape? Is there a feminization of agape? I think Myra brings in the concept that the force within is a feminine force, right? And my immediate questioning is the colonial, like how colonial are we talking about when we, like, what, how does colonialism impact our understanding of femininity, our understanding of masculinity, understanding whether we genderize it or we energize it? But want to introduce then this womb theory coming out of the European womb, right? That and I want to read this out loud. So Aristotle, this is from Dr. James's. We started with the reference where this is from at the beginning. Aristotle offers the deliberative faculty of the soul as the apex philosophy and theory, therefore attributing to it an exclusionary property. It sits at the top of the seesaw. In this worldview, the capacity for consciousness to think critically and comprehensively is attributed only to those free from captivity and female identity. Slaves and females are told they lack such intellectual capacity and so are forewarned. In a world dominated by humans, their tenuous links to human will be their demise in social and political life. It is, if not an accelerant towards their biological death. Aristotle's legacy grants womb theory a protected status that legitimizes structures of torture and trauma that transfer agency, labor, and time. Aristotle's trifurcation, uh, mean these words. Trifurcation produces the free male as human theorist, the slave as anti-human non-theorist. I mean, just sit with that. The slave as anti-human non-theorist, and the non-slave female as semi-human, defective, anti-theorist. The natural order of human, anti-human, and semi-human solidifies through the sacrifice of servants and slaves, presents ideology as philosophy in which the capacity for the theory and freedom are proprietary possessions held against future citizens. So my take on this is, my mom, the fella, and we'd be like, yes, there's language, there's grammar, lots to unpack. We do within the nonprofit arm of the work I do, in 23, coming in with reading circles. We want to unpack real literature in ways that we can take them in digestible parts. And to me, this again, this unholy trinity here, this relationship that is sexualized, is genderized, is energetically polarizing. We can't. There's no way around it. In whether we're talking revolutionary, whether we're talking anti-revolutionary, whether we're talking the hegemonic state, whether we're talking the revolutionary state, it's this element. It's all over social media. All we got are gender wars all day long. And there's something to this element of the child welfare system that is this very secret attack. It feels secret because we don't talk about it, because it is feminized. No? Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. Condoleezza Rice is not a captive maternal. Okay. I mean, what I say also.
Oh, why not?
Why not? Because.
Why not? Why she not?
Is
she not acting off survival as well?
No. Because she helped to start the lies of weapons of mass destruction that led to hundreds of thousands of deaths among the Iraqis and considerable dying of U.S. soldier and personnel. And so if you work for empire, I mean, you can call it a collaborator, you can call it whatever you want, but at that level, State Department level, I want, what was his name? Colin Powell's job. I mean, on that competitive level, right, to outdo the guys, it's not, no. I mean, I never said everybody was a captive maternal. I started with the conflicted, she's like, I got to get my kid into better high school. What, hon?
But she is. And the reason I say she is because those women that are in those positions, we see their accolades, we see their status, we see their access to power, and we expect them to be courageous. But if anything, they are in close proximity to seeing how sexism really plays out. So they're just trying to get the best position in the society that is already set.
Okay.
And I learned that in the military.
No, I mean, thank you.
I learned that.
Okay.
I ain't going for it. I when I tell you, as a Black woman in the military, the people who caused me the most harm or made sure that I fell into the assimilation, even though I didn't, into the assimilation of a white supremacist ideal of how to show up was Black women. They coached me. They tried to groom me. But they still, but now at this age, 32, at 18 and 19, I'm resisting against them. I'm like, sis, it's me against you, because I see what you're doing. But now at 32, I done been in these institutions, I done sat with them, and now they are weak within their root chakra. They are consumed with fear on a daily basis.
Okay, but
they captive too. They got a better position.
Okay, maybe I have to rethink it, but I'm just going to go for this. You can't save everybody. I have a choice between spending my time on Condoleezza. No, seriously,
yes, ma'am.
You know that better than you know that better than anybody else. So if I have guilt because I love somebody, fine. But I'm gonna rescue the 5-year-old twins first. And Rice is like probably 1 million people down on the list, right? Once you become complicit in empire, do you get to come home? Absolutely. Like, I'm sure they love her in Birmingham. I mean, the wealth. I mean, I'm at Stanford now. I do whatever, whatever. Just like people loved Obama, and he was an imperial black president. That was your first imperial black president. I voted for him. Put a TV in the room so the babies, they're just toddlers. Like, look, he's being inaugurated. You're gonna remember this in your subconscious. It's like, it was a friggin' waste of time and money. All right, it's you can't save everybody. And there's some of people, it's like, look, I'm gonna go straight to Samuel Little. Samuel Little he rapes and kills 93 women, right? And who does he target? Disproportionately black, but also women who are neurodiverse, who self-medicate with um, illegal or not authorized drugs because they're trying to just get through the pain of being outsiders and knowing they're neurodiverse and everybody thinks they don't belong anywhere, right? And he has a black woman, an older black woman who's probably had some mental health issues too, who would clean up, I'm sorry, trigger warning, just put a big flash on, would clean up the back of the station wagon because he would like rape him in the back of the wagon and then he'd strangle him there and dump the body. How do you get 93? Nobody shot him this, by 2 or 3. You hit those numbers. He dies in his 80s in prison. Probably had a nice meal. Everybody doesn't need to be saved, right? And the people who do structural harm, either by proxy or direct harm because they want to be a serial killer, I don't have time for them. And that I've said before in other platforms. Like, wait,
can we pause for a second? How do you unpack that from an abolitionist framework? Please.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, I have a critique of abolitionism. What, Myra? I have a critique of abolitionism.
Yeah. When we think about peace circles, right? We think about the offender and the victim and getting away from these languages. I think we have so much disdain, and I don't think it's wrong. I don't think your analysis is incorrect. I'm not saying that you are wrong. What I'm saying is it requires a lot of compassion because what these people are, they are the embodiment of what society is. It's our love affair with victimhood. It's our love affair with torture. It's our love affair with war as humans, and they are a direct product of that. And I think when they get to that point, when the self-hatred that is within us in this country as Black people, when we turn into Condoleezza Rice, when we turn into Clarence Thomas, right? Mm-hmm. That's our point of that's the point of no return. So there are measurement of how far you can go into self-hatred, and sometimes we just don't want to look at it. But without them, we wouldn't know where to stop at, because you're on survival mode. You're captive. You are in a society that has been set up for your demise. What would you do? You're going to survive. You're in survival mode. They're humans who are a reflection of the worst case scenario of what can happen to you when you get too much, when you assimilate too far for survival. In my opinion.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. So let me try to lay out what I'm trying to say. Agape is real. I have limitations in agape. I'm not that skilled in agape. Maybe 5-10 years from now, I'll get somewhere. I didn't say I would personally take him out, but I would say, right, that, and I tried to say this last Tuesday with Afro-pessimism, and they said I was just feeling guilt. Maybe they didn't say that, but they weren't sure I thought through things clearly. My position is you're allowed to use force to stop violence. And self-defense or the use of force is not the equivalent of violence. It's permissible. Some Buddhists will agree, other people won't. I don't care. But my whole thing, as we know, as mothers or caretakers, is that somebody comes for your kids, everything in the kitchen, the pot, the iron, the butcher. I mean, it's just if you actually think you're going to be a predator with my kid and I'm going to watch it and just pray over it, I'm sorry, I'm getting in that zone. It's not going to happen. And then I can just say I failed as a spiritual person. I don't care as long as my kid is safe. And if you need to like lose a digit or something because you don't know how to self-regulate your violence, I feel sorry about that, but that's not my primary. So, and as I think on the individual, I think on the larger collective. You don't get to sex traffic 12-year-olds. If you think that's how you want to make your money, then we have a problem. Now, actually, as an academic who has a cushy lifestyle, whatever, I'm not going to, I'm not on the front lines. Whatever I was doing in my 20s, I'm not doing it now, right? But I think that some of the abolition narrative doesn't allow us to rage. And I don't believe in revenge. That's what I said on Tuesday night. Everybody was like, "Oh, that's real." I was like, "It's real, but it's not principled." And I think we should be principled and self-disciplined. But in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a war zone, everybody was talking about survival. Okay, well, my kids need to survive. Your kids need to survive. So we're going to do what we need to do in order for them to survive. Then we'll have to deal with legal and everything else afterwards. And somebody should have stopped him. And the prisons kept cycling him in and out. That's how you get 93. And why? Because some police allegedly have this acronym, NHI, no humans involved. People who are neurodiverse, people who are sex workers, people who are poor, people who are Black, people who have IQs of 60, like the police don't look for them. Like
Yeah.
no humans involved. Like when they show up dead, they just tag them NHI. Why should we try to figure out what family they came from? So yes, it can be you're not human as an anti-Black construct. It also can be you're not human because the people who are supposed to protect you really don't give a damn. And so then the question becomes, how do we want to protect ourselves? And you cannot protect everybody, especially people who have so much self-hatred that they're collaborators with our torturers. I'm sorry if that sounds. I'm
Concept
sorry
of
if that sounds well, I feel like I poured everything on Mara. Sorry if that sounds judgmental. I really respect you. I just have strong
No, no, no,
feelings
no. So
about people.
I'm really valid like you are, George.
can I
I
say,
really
I
agree
think we need a
with
part
everything
two.
you said.
Can I interject and say that I think we need a part
I,
two? I'd love to set up another time and we could come up, in the new year.
oh,
I think there's so much more to be unpacked here. I mean, it's like there was a bomb that was just dropped in the middle here. No humans involved. Like, what? The police gets worse the more I know about the whole institution and how it functions and its relationship to humanity, but its relationship to Black life, Black disabled life, and why. I mean, it explains so much. But like, I would love to like maybe have at least some grounding thoughts. And I feel I do enjoy a good dialectic. I am not I'm a student of Fanon. I appreciate violence as a cleanser, right? I mean, I wasn't my father fought in the Biafran War. He died of COVID, but he had dementia, and in his last days, his most prominent memories um, was of war. And my mom was also, a military nurse, and so we were raised in constant memory, not an active military culture in the way that you all are describing, which is very fascinating to me. I did a lot of work on AFRICOM pre-motherhood and somehow trying to, let that transition into what we're facing now, the plot thickens. But Dr. James, can you help us ground where we can, and hopefully visit and come back in January and pick and go a little deeper, please?
Yeah, I would say that we're all united here and we spent 2 hours like doing our dialectical dance and stomping because we love. I mean, that's the only reason why we show up in our various ways and we're committed and we make sacrifices to make that love evident to others. So whatever our debates are, whatever our traumas in the plural, whatever the betrayals are from the state, which you probably never believed in it from the first go, those are secondary or tertiary wounds. The thing is, our hearts remain intact. And however we approach and learn from abolition, however we approach and learn from spirituality, however we embrace ourselves embodied in female form, with all the vulnerabilities that come with it. We know that we not only love, but that we are loved. And so we survive.
Thank you all so much, and thank you all that have joined. Mama Myra, thank you for bringing that Chi-Town energy. The only person that can call me shy, it's actually Chi, but I'll take shy only from my Chicago folks. Dr. James, I love you more. I'll just say that, and more and more and more. Ayami, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Antonio, Ryan. Ryan is a ride or die. Ryan was there when the police was accosting us last August at our reproductive justice rally. I mean, I fell in love with Ryan right at that moment because like she just kept interpreting. No, didn't break, didn't stop. Was like the people are going to understand on multiple domains what is happening in this moment. I appreciate all warrior energy. I do agree. I love the deeper that we're going to go in January, and maybe more and more. I think it's worth unpacking. It's worth delivering to our people. It's worth integrating in our work, in the work that we're doing. We're coming into heavy advocacy in January. So to me, theory has legs. Theory is a weapon in and of itself, as noted before. I don't think there is a more brilliant theorist of the 21st century than Dr. Joy James. I mean, and gives so freely of thought. And I say that, with all that there is, I in me, that is my love. I do want to thank Diversity Funds for providing funds for us to be able to host this period, to be able to provide the books to our caregivers that are joining in dialogue, to be able to support our accessibility journey in providing these public platforms. Everyone have a safe holiday. If you celebrate, if you don't, I get it. And please be blessed. Thank you, and see you next time.